Hi, Dr. Carlos Todd here, and welcome to another video where we talk about how to fight less, love more. So, what are we discussing today? We're talking about money and anger, how financial stress destroys relationships. So, this video is being recorded in May of 2026, and we're going to talk through some of the financial conflicts that exist from an emotional standpoint, and what are some of the things that we can do because, for many people living in this time, the cost of groceries, the cost of gas is really becoming an issue. Plus, the mounting debt for individuals is really a concern. So, for a lot of couples, the fights about money is a real thing. Money stress affects people emotionally, psychologically, physically, and money represents for many people security, control, freedom, flexibility, power, safety, and stability. And when people have money issues, they feel threatened in some ways, and this can come out in anger in relationships. So for the first point that I want you to kind of think about is that financial stress causes emotional behavior. When people are under financial stress, they have certain challenges. Stress is going to affect your ability to regulate, it's going to affect your patience, it's going to affect your communication and problem solving skills because the stress gets higher. The stress tends to be numbing, puts you in a place where you are either avoiding or you're constantly on the attack. And for folks, dealing with that constant money issues, now higher levels of stress can cause you to be more reactive, can cause you to be more irritable, can cause you to be more defensive. And if these issues, the financial issues, are chronic, you don't even realize after a certain point that it's actually the money issues that are really kind of causing the challenge. And what couples will sometimes do is that they'll focus in on the personal stuff, right? So they personalize their behaviors, right? And then they're not really paying attention to the fact that these things are happening largely because of the money challenges, right? They may have some idea, but they don't really label it as money challenges. They label it as you are the problem. The issues around inflation and debt and business pressure, the cost of being a parent, housing costs, it's just mounting for individuals. It really can be driving this stress. Couples often have different emotional relationships with money. Some people, their relationship with money is about, for some people, they're hyper focused on saving. Nothing wrong with that, right? The other person may be hyper focused on just enjoying life, right? Enjoy it, it's not gonna last. Some people have super fears about debt, right? Any kind of debt. And so they're gonna respond based on that. Other people just minimize the financial risk that they're in and they don't want to take any action. So there are different ways that people think about money. And these things are driven by childhood experiences, past relationships, past trauma, and then their feelings of security or insecurity growing up in the environment that they grew up in. People have feelings around scarcity, right? Some people grow up in environments where they perceive things to be scarce, and so they want to conserve as much as possible. So it really is important for couples to have conversations around how they experience money as young people, so that you have a sense of what it really is driving some of these conflicts, right? Sometimes the idea of understanding actually can help you to solve problems better, as opposed to just personalizing things. Ask questions like, how did your parents deal with money issues? It seems like a simple thing, but a lot of times couples don't ask these questions. The other point is that financial stress creates resentment, and resentment leads to something that we call negative sentiment override, where you're anticipating negative outcomes in situations or in relationships, and then there's a real struggle to get into the meat of a conversation because there's that push or that drive or that thinking in the mind that it's not going to go well anyway, so what's the point? And so I think for some people, you really have to think about, for them, the money issues can feel like they're not being supported, or they're feeling controlled, right? Or they're feeling overburdened, or they're feeling judged. Now a simple argument about money is really turning into something else. And I've said this in previous videos, where you really need to consider that every conversation has a text and a subtext. The text is, why'd you spend money on this? But the subtext is, I have real fears about us not having, because when we were young, our house got foreclosed on, and we had to move out, and then we were in the worst neighborhood ever, and I don't ever want that to happen to me. Just the act of having that conversation, the subtext, can really help you move towards a place where you can come up with solutions. Because when people feel understood, there's a greater possibility you can come up with solutions, as opposed to you're just spending money like you're crazy. There's something wrong with you. Whether there's something wrong with the person or not is debatable, but should not be the starting place of the conversation. people can have meaningful conversations about the meaning around the fact that they don't earn the same amount of money and how that creates feelings of insecurity, meaningful conversations about overspending, meaningful conversations about hidden purchases, meaningful conversations about financial secrecy, and so on. What is in point number 4 here? Money conflicts often trigger identity issues. Money can be an issue of feeling like they're not successful, issues around masculinity, self-worth, competence, and independence. Again, subtext versus text. So these are real identity issues. If your husband or wife can't earn in the way that they want to earn, they don't feel accomplished. They don't feel as though they're moving in the direction that they want to move in. So again, you want to be able to have those conversations as opposed to just pointing fingers at the other person. Having conversations about what does money mean to them, right? For men, may have a strong sense of wanting to be a provider, wanting to be able to be there for their family. They're not. And so that can create some struggles in itself. Financial anxiety keeps couples emotionally activated. And this is another point that I think one needs to consider. This is what we call, like I said this earlier, but this is what you call negative sentiment override in some ways. Conversations now get heavier because you're anticipating negative outcomes. Patience is decreased, emotional safety declines, and eventually the couple can't discuss money safely or feel safe discussing money because it just feels too heavy. They're constantly in survival mode. Anxiety, having fears about the future, and emotional exhaustion and financial burnout. So the goal is to have a conversation where you hear, before you can talk about the money, asking questions about what money means to you, what your experiences with money were in the past. Yes, you may have to set some boundaries. You may have to decide that you're going to separate out bank accounts. You may have to make some other decisions before we get there. I think you want to have some meaningful conversations about the meaning of meaningful conversations about meaning. Slow these conversations down. Sometimes I tell people that the slow way is the fast way. If you can have a meaningful conversation about what money is, what it means to you, and the person begins to feel heard, you'll be very, very surprised how you can come to a consensus and work through things in ways that you did not expect that would actually happen. Trust me on that, right? Point number 6 is really understanding that avoiding the situation just makes it worse. You're just going to pile on more, right? Avoidance creates assumptions that may or may not be true. It creates resentment, it creates confusion, it creates mistrust, and so on. And that's something I think you want to consider, because you do not want yourself in a situation where there's secret debt, there's hidden spending, people are hiding bank accounts, and so on, and then issues about fear of judgment. You want to make sure that you have that conversation. So, what do? What actually helps? Mentioned this a few times already in the video, just to reinforce the text versus the subtext, meaningful conversations about meaning. The goal here is not to blame. The goal is not to criticize. The goal is not to win. The goal is to solve problems, to solve the financial problems, to work as a team, and to have a certain amount of emotional safety. What do couples need? They need transparency, they need shared goals, they need calmer conversations, they need to understand that financial problems are difficult enough. You don't want to lay the emotional stuff on top of it. I recommend weekly meetings about, not initially about money, but again, the meaning of money and what your fears are, what are the emotions that you have around money, before you even get to budgeting or whether you're going to separate accounts or not. Plan together, discuss budgets, right? Have a more collaborative mindset. That is the goal. Understand that you're not alone in this situation, right? There's so many couples that are struggling with this. There's so many couples that have conflicts around money. It's a feature. And I don't expect it to get any better in terms of the actual frequency of this coming up. But there are ways, despite the frequency, there are ways to actively have meaningful conversations. Right? And so the goal is to learn to communicate better. What I recommend is my book, Fight Plan. It's not a book specifically about money, but it is definitely a book about how to manage conflict in relationships. You can click the link below for that. Books around anger are also in the link below, the links below, sorry. And then for courses on anger and anger management, you want to visit masteringanger.com, and courses on conflict management, you want to visit masteringconflict.com. Take care until the next video where we learn to fight less, love more. Bye-bye.